Welcome to our Q&A session with the NASA astronauts from the Artemis 2 mission. I'm Sarah Knapton, I'm the science editor of the Daily Telegraph. At this event, it's exclusively for Telegraph subscribers, so I want to thank you all for your ongoing commitment to the Telegraph and for coming today. A little bit of housekeeping. You can make the video full screen if you click on the square at the bottom right of the screen, so that should be there if you want to make us jumbo-sized. And thank you to everyone who sent in their questions. I've read them all, they were brilliant, and I'll be asking those towards the end, so thank you very much for those. So I'd like to welcome NASA's Victor Glover and Jeremy Hansen from the Canadian Space Agency. Thank you so much for coming. This is brilliant. I was very excited when I heard I'd be getting to chat to you today. Before we get going, I just want to set the scene about you two and give a bit of background, if that's all right. So if anything is wrong, poke your hand up when I'm going through it and just correct me. Victor, born in California, served as a US Navy aviator and has been a test pilot for the FA-18 Hornet, is that right? The Super Hornet in the EA-18G Growler, is that correct? Yes. Correct. Clocked up more than 3,000 hours in the air, elected as an astronaut for NASA in 2013, most recently served as a pilot and second in command on the second crewed flight of SpaceX's Crew Dragon, which landed May 21?
2021, yes.
2021. Yeah. Also served on the ISS, the International Space Station, in 2021, carrying out 3 spacewalks.
4, but
I knew to check that one. And becoming the first African-American to fly on a long-term mission to the ISS, and will be the first black astronaut to make a flyby of the moon on Artemis 2. On top of that, Victor holds a Bachelor of Science in General Engineering, a Master of Science in Flight Test Engineering, a Master of Science in Systems Engineering, and a Master of Military Operational Art and Science.
Sorry, you might want to make us smaller now.
And he's also completed a certificate in legislative studies at Georgetown University and was a legislative fellow in the US Senate when selected as an astronaut candidate.
True. Yeah.
Is that all right?
Yes.
Good. Jeremy, you've got a lot to catch up with here. Let's see. Born in London, sadly not this one, Ontario. Joined the Royal Canadian Air Cadet Squadron age 12, gained your glider wings at 16, and then pilot licence at 17. Is that correct? Jeremy joined the Canadian Armed Forces as an officer, then graduated from Royal Military College of Canada with a degree in space science.
Yep, just one degree.
He served as a CF-18 fighter pilot. Is that how you say it?
Yes.
And in 2009 was selected to be an astronaut by the Canadian Space Agency, going on to work at Mission Control Centre for the International Space Station. In 2013, participated in the European Space Agency's CAVES programme, living underground in Sardinia for 6 days. And the following year became an aquanaut, joining the Nemo 19 programme, living underwater for 7 days off the coast of Florida. Wow. And then from 2017, you began training astronauts at NASA, I think, is that right? And this year was assigned to the Artemis mission, will become the first Canadian to ever venture to the moon. That's all we've got time for. I'm always amazingly impressed by the CVs of astronauts. You just seem to have done more in, the first 30, 40, 50 years of your lives than anyone else manages in their entire lives. I think you're both 47, so you weren't alive when the first moon landings happened, right. Sort of. But Victor, I was going to start with you. How did space come into your consciousness, and why did you make that move from a sort of military background into a space?
Yeah, great question, because it wasn't my goal as a child to be an astronaut, but the Challenger tragedy really solidified, the importance of it. I was in 4th grade, and I was living in Texas at the time, briefly, and the day of the tragedy, they pulled us all into the auditorium, and I remember being impacted, and it was sad, but it was when the principal walked into the auditorium to make the announcement and to turn on the news that I realized, I guess it was my first deep thought as a child, that this is because they're national heroes. That idea of this is much bigger than just the tragic loss of life. And so that is really what started me thinking about the importance of this. And but that didn't start me on that journey per se. I went to college to study automotive design and to play sports, and I got an engineering degree, and going into the military, that's really what started my awareness, and I was a test pilot, or in test pilot school, when I saw Pam Milroy give a speech about her mission, and that talk is what made me decide to apply. Originally for the 2009 class, and I didn't make it for that one and applied for the next one, and in 2013 they offered me an opportunity.
Can you remember what Pam said?
Actually it was she was the commander of the mission, one of the few female, at the time I think the second female commander of a space shuttle mission. And it was the in her talk, it was very technical. They made the repair on the solar arrays, where if you are familiar with the cufflink story, and it was technical, but it was the way she spoke about her crewmates and the reverence that she had, the respect and the camaraderie. And so for me, it was as much engineering as it was football and wrestling that made me join the military. And going into naval aviation was very much technical, tactical, but also an opportunity to work together with these teams. The teamwork side of it was very important. And watching her give that talk, it was very evident that this was much more than an amazing technical operation, that there was something special about those people to her. And I just thought, you know what, they can tell me no, but I'm going to at least throw my hat in the ring. And so, you know, as a 10-year-old or so, that seed was planted, but it was at about 27 where I decided, like, this is a thing I'm going to try for. And if I don't get it, that's okay, but I'm going to try.
Because it must have been, as an American growing up in the 80s, it must have been in the back of your mind, in American consciousness, it was such a massive thing. Even in Britain, you could see that. And Canada, Jeremy, I remember reading a little anecdote about how you got some encyclopedias from your parents. Tell us that story.
So encyclopedias started showing up one book at a time, and encyclopedias showed up, and I was already interested in airplanes. I can't really tell you why, I just loved them. I'd never been in one, but something captured my imagination about flying, and I was in there, and they had these great pictures that I would go and look at in Encyclopedia A, and then one day I came across Armstrong. I think probably flipped to the wrong page, and there's a picture. It's probably Buzz Aldrin in that picture, but there's a human standing on the moon, and I can still see that page in my brain. I went back to it so many times, and I just blown away by this idea that humans left Earth, went to the moon, and came back. And when I would look at the moon, I could imagine footsteps up there. Even though I couldn't see them, I knew, I'd seen a picture of it, there were footsteps on the moon, and that just changed my perspective. And so I turned my treehouse into a spaceship. I made dials out of popsicle sticks and cardboard. I had a control column in there that I crafted. I got some circuit breakers from the barn, some old circuit breakers for switches. I drew some stars and planets on the wall, and I just started exploring space. But most importantly, I started telling people that I was interested in it. And then like teachers and my parents and other mentors started to say, hey, this is not impossible, and you should do these things. You should try this. My dad was like, you should join Air Cadets, so this you to fly. And that's really why when I think about Artemis, I get excited about the ripple effects of this enormous team having set this this international collaboration, these big goals, because I lived the inspirational aspects of Apollo, and I know Artemis has that power, can hold that power for years to come of inspiring people to just do big things.
How close is your treehouse to Orion?
I missed a few things. It's roomier, it was taller.
From a size perspective,
but it has nice airflow as well, I suppose. That's different.
Yeah, it had windows that I could. My dad built a great treehouse. I have to commend him, and it had windows that could open up, and yeah, it was great. Great little treehouse. Not space worthy.
So moving on to the Artemis mission, because obviously that's so exciting. And Artemis 1 got off the ground in November. It's really exciting. Can you just talk us through what Artemis 2 will be doing? Because we're not actually landing on the moon yet, are we? We're doing a lunar flyby. So Victor, I wonder if you could talk me through the mission.
Correct. Artemis 2 is the next mission, and our goal is to make sure that there's a future mission where they can dock to a lunar lander or to a space station orbiting the moon. And so Artemis 2's goal is to make sure that this vehicle, the Orion spacecraft and the Space Launch System, the rocket, and all the ground systems can support a human mission. So we have about a 10-day mission. Depending on when we launch, you'll determine how long the mission is, but 10 days, and the first day we'll orbit the Earth. We'll do one lower altitude orbit, and then we'll go out to about 38,000 miles, and we'll orbit the Earth for almost an entire 24-hour period, checking out the systems to make sure everything is working. And during that first day, we'll do a rendezvous and proximity operations demo. What that means is we'll fly the spacecraft by hand, and we'll pretend to dock to our upper stage, and we'll use that to determine the handling qualities of the spacecraft. And then after that's disposed, we'll spend the rest of the first day in orbit of the Earth, and then we'll come back around the farther side of the Earth, and Houston will give us the go for the translunar injection. And I used to say it will be the first time that we've said that in over 50 years, but a Capcom from the space shuttle era said that they used that for a space shuttle mission. But this will be the first time that Houston's actually giving a spacecraft authority to go to the moon on a translunar injection. So they'll give us the go for TLI, and then about a 5-minute engine burn, and we'll start the 4-day coast to the moon. And so we'll speed up, and from the moment the engines shut off, we'll slow down about 2/3 of the way to the moon. And then when we get about to that 2/3 point, the gravity of the moon will start to overcome Earth and pull us toward the moon. And we'll slingshot around the moon on about the 4th or 5th day, and then a 4-day journey back to Earth and splash down in the Pacific Ocean.
Amazing. And Jeremy, you're mission specialist. What does that entail? And I had a question actually from a reader that I'll pop in now because it's relevant. But someone asked why you're not actually getting into orbit. I don't know if that's right that you're not getting.
Thanks.
It's the Canadians view. Someone said asked why you're not actually going into orbit. I think you're flying by rather than actually going actually into the moon's orbit. So I don't know if you could explain that.
Sure, I'll start there. The design trajectory is sort of like Apollo 7 and 8 put together. So if your viewers remember Apollo 7, they launched in the capsule and they spent the entire mission in Earth orbit. Apollo 8, they went to the moon, they went into lunar orbit. And we're trying to do both of those objectives, buy down those risks. We're trying to compress that into one mission. And so what Victor described, in order to do that 1 day in Earth orbit and to do the proximity operations that we want to do, we're actually going to give up a lot of propellant to do that. So we would have enough propellant to get into lunar orbit, but we wouldn't get out.
We'd be stuck.
So we're not going to do that. We're going to do this flyby of the moon, and that'll allow us to achieve all those objectives. My role on the vehicle is, we'll see how all the tasks get divided up. But we have work that takes 4 crew members to complete over those 9 days, and who does what tasks. There's Victor and our commander Reed Wiseman will be strapped into the seats with the flight controls for launch and landing. That is decided, and they will be there. They'll handle those portions of the mission, and Christine and I will back them up. And then after that, we'll just see what happens. We'll do what needs doing.
I will say that this mission, because it's the first time humans are flying Orion, all of the roles, commander sounds very specific and pilot sounds very specific, but those tasks will be done in minutes. Launch and into Earth orbit, and then, going from orbiting the Earth back to the splashdown point will be minutes. And the rest of the mission, the 9 days in between, we'll be living there, essentially doing the same things. We'll have some specific tasks that each one of us has to take care of. But the main objective for us is to live, eat, sleep, use the bathroom, and it'll be home for 10 days. And that all 4 of us are going to do, but that's also a part of it. This spacecraft is supposed to keep 4 human beings alive for up to 21 days. And so just, our exhaling CO2 and then the system being able to scrub that out and provide a breathable atmosphere, exercising in the vehicle and the atmospheric control system being able to handle that will be a part of those objectives.
It's very small, isn't it? Confined space to be with each other and Reed Wiseman and Christina.
It's cozy.
It's going to be cozy.
Yeah, it's like car camping in a minivan, but never getting out. And so there's not a lot of space, but we're all excited about that, and I'm not worried about that. I think we'll be ready when we hit the Pacific on day 10. I think we'll be ready to get out, but I'm not worried about that small space at all.
Yeah.
Have you done any? I was going to ask you about training and how it's maybe differs from usual astronaut training and ISS training. Is it different? Have you actually spent time together in a confined space?
We spend time in different activities. We call them analogs. So you mentioned the caves and Nemo. You did Nemo, right? Not just aquanaut training, but lived underwater, in a small confined space similar to our space station. And then Reed and Christine and I have lived on the space station. And while it's about the size of a 4 or 5 bedroom house, 2 bathrooms. That's very important to know. It's only when I started, it was only 2 bathrooms. We've got 3 now, and one of them likes to break all the time. But it's most days you will be in one module for a majority of the time, and so you can really be focused on just that one space. And so we have different ways of exposing you to these small, isolated, confined and pretty extreme environments. And we have a mock-up in Houston, the medium fidelity Orion, and so it's the best representation we have. And I think the longest I've done a 3-hour stretch in that thing, I believe. Have you spent a good amount of time?
Only 2 probably for me at a time.
And so we've got ways to test that out, but there's also, you don't want to practice bleeding too much, you know what I mean? So But we do train now, and it's actually very similar to the ISS training that we do. Systems, learning how the systems work together, and most important, how we work together to keep those systems working.
As we were talking a little bit before about how nice astronauts are and how I think you psychologically screen to make sure that is the case, because obviously you don't want to be in a confined space with someone, as you said, Jeremy, who turns out to be a jerk. So how does NASA, how does the Canadian Space Agency screen for that? Were you aware you were being screened for that when you were being recruited?
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's emphasized that, that's one of the aspects. There's the operational aspects that we're looking for in our candidates for sure, but we're also very much interested in their teamwork ability, because we understand that a high-functioning team requires people that really lean into each other, will sort of address challenges and want to fix them. And so we look for all of those things. We have psychiatrists and psychologists on the selection board as well, give us insights into people. And it's very clear that you're being evaluated for all aspects. But most importantly, probably the one that is most important is that behavioral aspect of that teamwork. That can really pull apart your ability to function at a high level.
Yeah, we're a really small organization, very small office, and so every single person really affects the culture of the astronaut office, the astronaut corps. And so it's, the last 500 or so people, we call them highly qualified, and we bring that down to about 150 people we interview. That's NASA. Canada's probably even more. They scrutinize even more because they have such small numbers. But, at the end, it's a panel. It's a group of people that looks at those folks and, would you live with them in a tin can for 6 months? So it's a group of people looking at another group of people to try and make those decisions.
Do you find the culture different? You've both served in the military. Do you find the culture different at NASA and the Canadian Space Agency, Canadian Space Agency? Is it noticeably different?
Very. I mean, it is very different in a sense that our missions are different. Preparing for combat, which is the core competency in our military, it's just a different type of focus. But in terms of the teamwork, the camaraderie, I think that's very strong as well. NASA's got a great culture. And I really appreciate that NASA learns and appreciates the leadership development that we do in the military. And so there's, I think, a nice fit. But they are very, very different.
Yeah, and the thing that came to mind when you were asking that is something that does overlap, and what you were alluding to a bit is that can-do attitude. That's very prevalent at NASA with the international collaboration and in the military. It's sort of hey, we take on big challenges. We're preparing people to be thinkers and problem solvers, not to do necessarily just specific things, but to be able to handle situations that we hadn't prepared for example. I mean, who do you call in society when all of the resources are now at their maximum? You call in the military for that extra help, and that military people are problem solvers. That's what you're training, and that is exactly what we do in the space program.
Just going back to the mission itself, you were talking about you'll practice steering for docking with a craft in space. Is that to dock with Starship? Is that the idea?
The docking will be analogous to Starship or to Lunar Gateway, the space station orbiting the moon. But yes, the same type of maneuvers would be completed to do that final portion of the approach to docking.
Because it's a different method, isn't it, than Apollo used? Apollo essentially went and then landed, and it's almost the second stage. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, it will be very different. The concept of operations will be very different, but there will still be a point where you have to rendezvous and dock with another spacecraft. And Apollo had that as well. And so this one will be, if you've ever seen an artist's rendition, it actually looks quite interesting to see. The Starship is, I believe it's a 37-meter long vehicle. It is gigantic, and to dock with the tiny Orion, it looks really interesting. Who's docking with who, But that will be the concept, and they'll dock in lunar orbit, and crew will transfer over. 2 out of the 4 crew members will transfer into Starship, and then go to the surface from there.
And then Artemis 3. Do you know who's flying with Artemis 3 yet, or could it be you, or will it be somebody else? Does anyone is that decided, or just nobody knows?
We haven't decided yet, and I don't have any say in the matter. But my gut feeling is that there are so few Artemis missions to go around that I would have a hard time if one of us was on Artemis 3 or any of the subsequent Artemis missions. It's there are lots of us to fly, and I don't think that doing multiple Artemis missions would be, fair to the rest of the Corps. That's just my gut feeling.
It always seems slightly a shame, though, that you go and you train for it, and you're probably the best people to do it, and then maybe someone else gets to go down.
No, it's not really like that. I mean, everybody in the Corps is qualified to fly these missions, and in fact, you want to spread that experience out because that's how you get your maximum benefit back. Yeah. So we don't really see it that way. I mean, as individuals, of course, like I would love to go walk on the moon, but what's more important than that is that we have people walking on the moon in the future, and we are achieving our goals, and we need to spread those experiences out. Who knows what the future brings? But I know for sure I will not be on Artemis 3. There won't be a Canadian on Artemis 3. So this is I won't be part of that. But that is totally fine by me. So
to be fair, we may be a part of it, but we won't be the crew. And I think the best way that we can sow our experience back into the system is to be around to help train, to answer questions. Hey, this is what that was like. This is what it sounded like. This is what it felt like, and help them with expectation management, which is maybe one of the core things to do as an astronaut, to not be surprised by something in space. And so we'll be able to help in that way, even though we won't be the crew.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any sense of trepidation at all? I mean, I know you're very, very experienced pilots and astronauts, but you are essentially going to be sitting on the biggest rocket to have ever left the Earth. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that scares you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've thought about it. I know it is a scary thing. We don't live in fear. It's a long way away, and also experience has taught us that in those moments you kind of are able to set the fear aside. It's a different emotion, and so I don't worry about being scared, but definitely acknowledge the fear that's associated with something like this and the risk. I mean, we spend a good portion of our week talking about the ways that we could lose the crew in space and how we're going to mitigate them. And we know there are some that we'll never think of, and that's just the reality of it. I think what's most important to me, just not to go on and on about this, but when people bring this up, it's really important to me to highlight the fact that we might lose a crew on a mission like this. Not likely. We will mitigate all the risks. I don't feel like that's very probable, but it is possible. And if we do, the most important thing is that we keep going. The only way society could let us down for that sacrifice would be if they didn't keep going. If the initial reaction was, hey, you need to shut this down, that would be devastating.
Right. Yeah. And, a part of the fact that we do talk about this quite a bit, it gives you a sense of focus. We know what our mission is, and people think it's that 10-day flight to the moon and back, but it's really to do all that we can to be ready for what we may not know is coming. And so I would say that I'm aware of the risk of this, but I don't spend a lot of time feeling nervous or anxious about it. There is one thing that I do feel that about, and that is my family being there to watch the whole thing, right? The entire time they're holding their breath. Mm-hmm. And then I know that it's not until we're safely back on Earth that they really truly can exhale and be comfortable. Mm-hmm. And so that's the part that gives me the most hesitation. But they know that Dad's at work doing his best to learn the system and to learn my crewmates so that we have the best chance we can of keeping ourselves and the vehicle safe. And so, but it's a risky thing, and it's important to be honest about that.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because obviously we didn't have a lot of moon missions for a long time, and probably one of the reasons was Challenger and various accidents that did happen that kind of made people a little bit twitchy about maybe sending astronauts into deep space. But why do you think it's taken so long? One of the most interesting facts I always think is the Wright brothers made the first flight in 1903, I think, and we were on the moon within just over 60 years of that. It's then taken nearly as long to get back. So what do you think is behind that? This is a nuanced discussion, really, not because it's not one thing. But if I had to summarize it, it's politics. It was really a political decision, and you see the swift end to the Apollo program was related to geopolitics. And so I think one of the great things that we've built up now is an international coalition and a real scientific basis for what we're going to do so that it won't be tied simply to politics. And so, to keep it short.
Yeah. And the other thing to highlight here is a lot of learning has happened over those years. So it's not like a time we stood still. We have the organization learned a ton with the space shuttle. The International Space Station is a leaping off platform for us. A lot of what we're taking to the moon is ISS, International Space Station heritage, and going to Mars. And I mean, we see it, we live it every day, but you don't do what we're doing now, the way we're doing it now, without the experiences that we have from the International Space Station, and we don't get to Mars without that continued low Earth orbit testing platform available. It's all linked together.
It's interesting because I was talking to my brother about meeting you two last night, and he was sort of saying, why are we going back to the moon? There's nothing there. What's the point? And it's interesting. You're like, ouch. But it's funny because I write about Artemis a lot, and it is something that people often ask me, why are we going back? What would you tell people who are a little bit dubious?
Well, I think it's important to talk about the spectrum. I'm really glad you brought this space station up. First of all, I have to say this, just not many people realize the International Space Station, the first piece went up in 1998. The first crew docked to the space station on November 2nd of 2000. So for 23 years and going, we've had humans in low Earth orbit every day. And so it's important to look at the spectrum of human spaceflight experience. And so the technologies that we're using, some of the CO2 removal and life support systems, our ability to provide fresh drinking water, those technologies have been really tested and honed on the International Space Station. And so the reason to go back to the moon, it's not just for the moon. There is a lot to learn from the moon. We are still learning things from the rocks, the samples we brought back from the moon in the 60s and 70s today. We have new technologies, new instrumentation, and we're learning things from those new samples. Going to the South Pole, our eventual target on the surface is a whole geologically significant location to continue to do science and learning about Earth, not just about the moon. But for me, the thing that I think is the most important is the inspiration. And it's easy to just dismiss that as a feeling, but I don't mean the feeling. I mean what Jeremy, to this day, is still being affected by. That photo in the encyclopedia, or what people use when they say moonshots. When humans do great things today, we call them moonshots. And now our generation has an opportunity to have our own literal moonshots. And bigger than space, bigger than science, bigger than technology, hopefully people can see this as cooperation. When humans put their minds and their might together, we can do great things. And I hope this is a reminder of what we are capable of when we work together. That's why I think we're going back.
And the question for both of you, but I've come across quite a few people recently who don't believe we ever did land on the moon. Is that something you'd come across? Because obviously it has been so long and people are very skeptical, and trust in science is getting worse. Are you hoping that this mission will stop that and just put to bed this idea that we never got there?
Yeah, I mean, that would be wonderful, but it's probably not possible. If people really want to know the truth, it's always been available for them to figure it out. And so when you come across people who have these perceptions of a flat Earth, or we never went to the moon, they don't really want to know that truth. And I don't think we can affect that. But if they want to, it'll be there for them. And I hope they do. It's better to believe the reality of things, I think.
And a little bit of skepticism is healthy, but I agree wholeheartedly with Jeremy. And if spending 10 years engaging in these discussions, and early on in my career, I thought it was my job to try and convince them. But I don't think people want to be convinced. They just want to be heard often when they share these concerns or these beliefs. And so, but the information is there. I mean, the imagery that we have, just like we're learning new things from the lunar samples, the rocks that we brought back, we're still seeing new things in imagery, right? We're processing photographs and seeing things that we didn't know were there before. And so we're learning from the Apollo era still. And if you really want to see the catalog of still and video imagery, I think one of the most powerful things to pay attention to is the recordings. When you listen to the recording of Apollo 11's landing, just the last few minutes where they're touching down, and then Apollo 12, that's breathtaking. And I don't know how you could fake that. But, I think if you really wanted to know, that information is there in high definition. But, like I said, a healthy amount of skepticism is also a good thing. Reminds us that we do have work to do, sharing it with the public.
One of the things I often hear people say is, why didn't we ever go back? And we did. I mean, we went back until 1972, we kept going back, and people were driving buggies on the moon, and it's almost like we forget that all happened, don't we? In the argument about whether it happened or not. I've lost my train of thought now. Just going back to the actual mission, will you have some downtime? I mean, you're going to have, maybe 4 days there and 4 days back, presumably you won't be working the whole time. Have you made plans what you want to do, what you want to see, what you want to look at?
Well, the mission planners come up with a work day. That first day is going to be very busy and very long. But they also plan in sleep and exercise, which are very important parts of being on a space mission, so that we're ready to go. Crew rest is important in aviation and human spaceflight. And they're going to come up with a good plan that gives us some time to rest and to appreciate being in the moment. And I try not to think too much, though, about what the free time might be like. I was standing outside with a crewmate, a retired astronaut, and we were looking up at the moon. And he said, "I know you're going to take tons of pictures, and you're going to share those with the public. Everybody's going to want to know what it looks like. But when you come back, I want you to tell me what it felt like." Mm-hmm. And that's maybe that conversation is the most I've thought about, what it's going to be like looking back at the Earth and the moon. But I try not to, when we get there the first time, that's going to be a time where we'll be out of radio comm with the Earth for one reason, but we're going to have a little bit of time to just do what we want to do when we observe the moon up close. And so I don't think too much about it, just so it'll be an authentic moment. We'll do what we need to do in the moment when we get there. Mm-hmm. But we'll have some downtime, so it'll be nice to write to the family, record things for the family, and spend time with one another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the only other thought I've had about it is just wanting to make sure I leave some space for myself to do nothing, and to sort of just, I think what you're getting at, just feeling it and trying to process the experience a little bit. So a little time to do nothing would be time well spent, I think.
Have you talked to any of the Apollo astronauts at all and asked for any advice? What kind of conversations have you had with people?
It's one of the really amazing things about this announcement is just so many people are happy that we're sending humans. I'm one of those people, but some of the Apollo astronauts that are still around have been really excited about this, and that we're finally on this journey. And a personal friend, Rusty Schweikart, who was on Apollo 9, we've shared in quite a bit. I flew some things to the International Space Station for him. He's been a great mentor and friend. And just actually right after that, friend and I were standing outside looking at the moon. I was sitting with Rusty and talking about this mission. And he is one of the folks that says to do things like make sure you just have time to do nothing. And he gave me a small Ziploc bag of just, we call it ancient wisdom, wise sayings that I took with me to the space station. And he shares lots of, neat perspectives that are important to me personally. But the folks that have been around, I just met Charlie Duke recently. So that was really amazing to just listen to him tell stories and share, what they think is important from Apollo for us to consider for Artemis. So that's been a really neat aspect of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and technical things too. We sat with Tom Stafford and just heard some of his stories about some of the things that surprised him and some of the challenges, and it was just great perspective. But it feels the same. It's a big challenge. Going to the moon hasn't gotten any easier. We've learned a lot, but it's still what kind of resonates with me as I go through this. I just see how many people it takes to do this, and it kind of goes back to the question your brother was asking too. Is one of the reasons that I feel that this is value added for humanity is the people I see on this team working in their wheelhouse, in their areas of genius, and they're doing great things. Society works best when you have people working in their areas of genius, and space does this. It brings people out of the woodwork to set big goals and work in their areas of genius, and you see real results. Some of the stuff I already see in Artemis, real learning is happening. Like things, even though we've been to the moon before, there are new things because we're doing it differently. Learning is happening, things that we wouldn't be discovering otherwise, and that will benefit us going forward in the future. It's really, really important, and things that will help us in how we use space to live better on this planet. Another neat thing about it is I'm starting to see these overlaps of like basic needs. You know, when we start to think about being on the moon for an extended period of time or actually going to Mars, you know, basic needs of humanity like water, food, healthcare. These are issues as we eclipse 8 billion that we need to grapple with here on the planet. And now there's this, we can bring that area of genius that I'm talking about to some of these issues that really matter for our survival here.
It's interesting because I interviewed Rusty on the 50th anniversary of the Apollo landing and Harrison Schmitt, and they've got such different takes on it. You know, Harrison was very, you know, I was there to look at the rocks and it was great. Mm-hmm. And then Rusty was like, oh, it was a cosmic dawn and it changed everything for humanity. And so their takes, having been to the same place and having both had a very profound experience and but seen it in a very different light. If you roll forward, talking about the future and how you think it will change things, roll forward another 50 years. What's happening? Have we got a lunar base? Have we made it to Mars? What will we be up to?
You know, I do think that's very important. You know, we've said that we're 25 years or so from Mars, but because we haven't started chasing down that goal, we have been 25 years from Mars for the last 25 years. Yeah. And I believe this journey and assigning a crew to go to the moon means we're now a step closer. And when Artemis 2 is in the bag, it'll be a step closer. And so I think, you know, 50 years from now, it would be great if we have a sustained presence around the moon, infrastructure, a responsible, sustained presence. And we've learned new ways and, you know, there's new technology to help get us to Mars. You know, that journey it's a long way. Conventional propulsion technology, it's a half a year or longer trip each way. And so getting to the moon and being able to find water, ice we can use to make rocket fuel, you know, gives us we're out of the atmosphere and the gravity well of Earth. That's a head start, literally a head start on the way to Mars. And so, but, you know, I think what I said earlier about why we're going back, the thing for me, the inspiration piece, you know, space makes people look up, you know, literally when you watch a rocket ascend into space, but also it kind of puts your mind on higher things. And for me, if we can sustain that, you know, if NASA and the Canadian Space Agency and the MBRSC Space Agency of the United Arab Emirates, if these agencies can continue to do things that people think are amazing, which they really are, because of those teams Jeremy talked about, then who knows where we'll be 50 years. I hope we're not limited to my imagination. I mean, we can do really amazing things, whatever the next generation of moonshots is meant to be, you know, and so I look forward to that.
It's interesting how we're having this sort of mix of commercial and sort of national now. It's really changed things, hasn't it? Because for a while it looked like sort of SpaceX was going to go off on its own and try and land on Mars and do things very much on its own, and now everything's coming together. Do you see that as a big change in how space is operating now? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is a big change, but it's the inevitable change. I think it's predictable. If you look at aviation, it's kind of followed the same formula, if you will, where you have a lot of government involvement initially, and then you try to move that into the commercial sector, and we're just seeing that natural evolution. And you can see, well, there are new challenges, and it brings challenges. Nothing's perfect, but that collaboration is beneficial ultimately if you can manage that collaboration, just like managing the international collaboration on the government side is a bigger challenge to do something like the International Space Station, one of our greatest human achievements, I would argue. That's a big challenge to do that as an international collaboration. But once you figure out that, like that's the hardest part. Once you figure out that, you can do more. And now it's the same thing with commercialization and intentionally. I think it's a real compliments to NASA leadership to have that vision to intentionally bring international government collaboration, but also to intentionally make the design allow for commercialization. And what I mean by that is if you watch, they've been very clever to make sure that they enable companies to submit or utilize solutions that will have a commercial application as well. And that's hard to do sometimes, because sometimes you're like, no, we want to control everything and we want to make sure it's perfect. You have to leave a little bit of extra space. That's good leadership from my perspective, and it'll pay dividends in the long run. Mm.
Perfect. Well, I think I'm going to move on to reader questions because I've got some great ones. The first one I'm going to crack on with because it's my favourite question, so I'm going to ask it first. This is from someone called K.E. A chocolate cream was eaten by second man Buzz Aldrin on the moon. If you could take a biscuit, which one would you take?
I'm partial.
I
to
hope you know this answer because I don't.
I'm partial to shortbread, so
Shortbread.
I ate shortbread cookies on the International Space Station. I love them on the ground, and I don't eat a lot of cookies, but when I have one, I want a shortbread cookie.
I take it
Biscuit.
back.
I'm sorry,
Biscuit. Yes.
I do know the answer to this one because we did manifest some maple cream biscuits. We call them cookies,
Of
but
course.
Yes.
because Reed Wiseman, he just makes them happy. I don't know what it is. I mean, they are a Canadian symbol, but they're probably average biscuits. But for Reed, they're
It changes his day.
Yeah.
I mean,
so it's our insurance
all
to
about
make sure we
maple.
don't have a grumpy commander. Have some cookies up there.
And good for energy, I imagine. keep your spirits up.
Yeah.
This one's from Howard. What are the practical challenges of space travel? Eating, drinking, washing, sleeping, etc.
All of those things are made interesting. It's challenging to do those things that are familiar in an unfamiliar environment. Weightlessness it literally turns you on your head. And so your brain spends time trying to rectify where it is. And it really it's a really interesting game that you have to play. And you have to think ahead, as you prepare to change the batteries in, some device. If you open the package of batteries, you're going to have batteries go every direction, And so it's a really neat puzzle that you have to solve. And then coming back to Earth, it's similar. You have to do that in reverse. That to me was a really persistent challenge that I appreciated. But weightlessness, it's for all the parts that are fun, being Iron Man or Superman, depending on your generation, for 6 months was great. But it also had challenges that were equal.
Did you ever have sort of that moment where you accidentally opened the screw bag and everything went everywhere?
All of it. All of the things, And so I learned by, you'll do it once at least, and then you'll hopefully learn from it.
Next few hours picking everything up.
Yes.
Question from Charlie. Do you believe in aliens?
You look at statistics, how big the known universe is, what we've just been able to see with Hubble and the James Webb Space Telescope. It's amazing to think of how big a light year is and how we've seen billions of them across. And so in that volume, it would make sense for there to be something else out there. But, with all the resources of multiple nations, governments, we've yet to find, we stared specifically, the Kepler telescope is looking specifically for stars and planets orbiting them that could be in the Goldilocks zone, a temperature range where it could support carbon-based life at least. And I think we have several thousand planets that we found, and we have yet to find the signatures of at least life as we know it. So I tell you that thinking for me, it's not a belief. It's just, it reminds me how important and how special the life that we do know exists is, and how important this planet, which supports and sustains that life, is. And so just makes me really grateful that we have Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy?
Yeah, no, similar. I mean, I want to believe. And
You got the T-shirt.
Yeah, exactly. Grew up watching X-Files in high school and definitely wanted to believe in aliens. However, I've seen no evidence that they're here today. But I imagine they have to be out there somewhere. Just logically, it makes sense. But when you start to think about, if we had the most amazing telescope and we could look into the next galaxy, like the closest galaxy for an alien civilization, let's flip it around, actually. Let's say there's an alien civilization in the closest neighboring galaxy, Andromeda, and they're looking at us right now. We're not here. They're looking a couple million years into the past, and we're just not here yet. So it's really hard to look for life, and that's the closest neighboring galaxy. There's a couple billion others to search after that.
Might find alien dinosaurs before we find intelligent alien life. I saw something recently that said the first thing we'll have to do when aliens come is explain to them why we keep making movies killing them. This one is from Martin. I don't think this goes back to the question of conspiracy theories, I think. Which, if any, of the previous moon landing sites will you fly by, and will you be close enough to have the opportunity to photograph or observe them in any way?
That's a great question. Because the Apollo astronauts wanted to land near the equator and in lighted conditions there, if you look up at the moon, the part you see, they landed there. Our eventual landing sites will be at the pole, so a little bit of a tangential surface, totally different location. And also, that'll mean our trajectory will be closest when we're on the far side of the moon. So really opposite of where the Apollo astronauts landed. With the aid of some really powerful, magnification, we may be able to image them on the way in as we're getting closer to the moon. But that's, it may not happen on Artemis 2, but we have this really great team and this really great technology called the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, LRO, that is taking amazing imagery of the moon's surface. We have high resolution, 1 meter or better imagery of almost the entire surface of the moon. And that's how we've developed the targets for the South Pole landings. And so they have been able to image lots of things, from the Soviet Union rovers on the moon to our Apollo landers to even the most recent, the Indian rover that just landed and the Russian one that didn't make it. They were able to find the impact site. And so LRO has produced some really great imagery.
And can you go and see those pictures? Are they sort of somewhere on NASA's website, or
Yes.
we can go?
If you were to just search the internet for Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter LRO imagery, you'll be able to see what they post.
So people that don't believe need to go to that site.
Like Jeremy said, it's there. If you want to see it, the data is there.
Yeah, you can actually see, you can't see individual blueprints, but you can see the paths that they walked or the rovers.
And the rover tracks,
Yeah, I mean, you can see all of that. It's really cool to look at.
Yeah.
Question from Malcolm. What's the one item, if you were allowed, you would like to leave on the moon?
I appreciate this question, Malcolm. Thank you. I wouldn't leave anything. When you land, you're going to have to touch the surface, but when we're going to look for life, for example, you want to know that if you find something, you want to know that it's not something we left when we were there the last time. And so if you've ever heard the term planetary protection, it's not building a force field around the planet. It's these kinds of things, not leaving our organic footprints on the surfaces of the moon or Mars or other celestial bodies. And so I personally wouldn't leave anything, just because I think it's important to protect the integrity. And when I said earlier about being responsible in our sustained presence, I think it's important to preserve the moon as much as we can. Just like we think about, preserving our earth and respecting our water and our air, I think it's important to protect that space, especially early on while we're doing scientific experimentation.
Jeremy, no littering on the moon, would you agree?
Yeah, I agree with that. The only, other thought I have had about it is, we go on these expeditions, we practice leave no trace when we're camping, for example. So like, I completely align with what Victor said. But then there is the other, it might be okay to intentionally think about something, because something that we love as humans is when we find traces of a civilization. Like some of the most magical moments for me hiking in the Canyonlands is seeing, a handprint in the wall, or artists, they drew stuff on the canyon walls, and finding those things almost magical. They're like these little Easter eggs.
Yeah,
and so
true.
Not destroying it, but also the fact that we were there, and maybe we can be intentional about leaving some smart things for people to look at in the future.
Yeah, that would be neat.
Question from Mal. Does planning to go to space make everyday life seem more mundane?
Oh, I don't think so. Especially having done it before, it helps put things in perspective, though. And so, no, I really appreciate this time and being with my family and preparing them for this journey. To me, that is maybe more important than the technical and operational training I do on a daily basis. So I don't think it makes this mundane. I mean, being in space, there's a letter stuck to the airlock on the International Space Station. And it's a letter from one of the crew members that unfortunately perished in Columbia, STS-107. But the very last sentence says, if I had been born in space, I would long to go to Earth much more than I ever longed to go to space. And I just feel that being in space makes you long to be back on Earth. And so I don't find this to be mundane at all. This is the point, As soon as you leave it, the mission is now to get back to it.
Did you get homesick on the ISS?
It wasn't homesick. It's just an appreciation for it, And when you're in space and you can see more of the Earth than you can from sea level, you look down on that and you've maybe heard people say things like everything you love is there. Gandhi and Shakespeare, it's all there except for you and the crew that are in space at the time. And I really felt that. I got to live that experience. Not many human beings get to miss Earth. and I missed it. And so being back on Earth makes you much more intentional about your existence here. And so I don't find it to be mundane at all. I think this, and to be honest, the best part of a space mission is training for it. I mean, the mission is great too, but training on the ground is a great part of the adventure as well.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy, anything to add about the mundanity of Earth after space?
No, it doesn't feel that way at all. I mean, I'm really excited about the mission. I love the training. But the most important things I'm doing in my life, I'm doing on planet Earth. You know, my family and raising my kids, supporting my children. I mean, these are the most important things I'll do in my life. This job is a tremendous privilege, and I love it, and I'm grateful for it. But no, this is the magical life is here on Earth, and this will just amplify that for me, I believe.
There's that amazing quote of Jim Lovell, isn't there, where he sticks his thumb out and covers everything that he says he loves back at home. It's all gone. Speaking of which is a seamless segue, Tom Hanks played Jim Lovell in Apollo 13. Who would you like to play you when the inevitable film gets made? Have you thought about it? You must have thought about it.
No.
Honestly,
but it's the second time I've been asked that question. I still did. I was like, I didn't even want to think about that.
Right. I'm just appreciate the fact that you asked me that question, but I don't have an answer.
We'll come up with some answers. This is a question from Henry, age 7. How do you sit on the toilet with the gravity in space?
Yeah, so, it's interesting. Maybe you've heard the term microgravity, and, I don't want to get into all that. We don't have to talk orbital mechanics. In space, on the space station or on our way to the moon, we will be experiencing weightlessness, okay? So what that means is if you try to sit on a thing, as soon as you touch it, the force of it touching will push you apart. And so I would say the most important thing is very intentionally. And why I say that is because you can, nowadays, most of us use the bathroom on autopilot. You might sit down and scroll social media or read a magazine or a book or talk on the phone, who knows? You can't do that in space. If you try, it could go very badly. And it's not just that it would be bad for you. It can be bad for you and your crewmates. And so, there were times where it was a group effort to try and recover from a bathroom, off nominal situation. And so it's very intentional. It's essentially you take a bucket and a vacuum or a hose and a vacuum. That's how space bathrooms work in one form or another. But you have to be intentional while you're using it. It could go badly very quickly.
I want to be a good crewmate.
Yeah, arguably it's worse for everyone else than you.
Right.
But bathroom off nominal moment, I think is my new favourite phrase. So thanks for that. A question from George, age 11, which is sort of similar. What's the nicest space food? What are you going to be eating up there?
I mean, we have a really diverse diet. So we went to the food lab like 3 lunches where we left super full after having like a little sample size of everything. It took us 3 meals to try everything once in little tiny bites. And there's a lot of options. I can't even think. I chose like a seafood curry, I think, that I really liked.
That sounds like a bathroom off nominal moment waiting to happen, I have to say.
Hope not.
It's nice.
We'll train beforehand.
Yeah.
There's just so many different types of food. But I mean, you ate a lot of that diet in space.
First of all, they're always adding new options, and really the space station is our primary mission right now, our primary mission set. And so for that mission, the average mission is 6 months. And so variety is what's really important. For this mission, it's 10 days. It's, it's camping. You can, plan your camp menu, and we still have all of those options. The entire space station menu, plus a few things that we've added to it. We had some Canadian foods offered to us, those maple cookies that we chose. And so we've got lots to choose from. And variety, I think, is still going to be important for this. I mean, we can almost not eat the same thing for any of the 10 days that we're in space. And so that alone will be very nice. But the food we eat, it's not all rehydrated or, things like the freeze-dried ice cream that you can get in the gift shops at the space centers. It's, whole, full-size chicken breasts, and we've got vegetables that are, it's an amazing menu. Our food is actually one of the really well-done things that we have. Our food lab prepares some amazing cuisine that's healthy and low sodium, because that's a part of keeping our bones healthy while we're in space.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, quite nice variety.
Are you there long enough where you need to exercise to stop the effects of microgravity on the bones? Is a 10-day mission, does it have an impact in that shorter time?
Yes.
Yes, it does.
Yes. You're affected. They use a term deconditioning just kind of for all of the things, but the fluid shift starts, it begins instantly as soon as you experience weightlessness. But the effect on your muscles and bones is also instant. And so you may not lose, on a 6-month mission, you can lose more bone and muscle mass, but those effects can become evident right away. And another important thing about the exercise is not just as a countermeasure, a good NASA term, a countermeasure to the bone and muscle loss. It also is just a really important, like, emotional, you talked about downtime. I think exercise was maybe the one consistent thing throughout the entire mission. The exercise machine never broke. Well, we have 3, a treadmill, a bike, and a strength training device on the space station. And on Orion, we have a rower, if you're familiar with the rower, but we can use it in different ways to do isolated muscle exercises or multiple joint moves. And it's a really nice social, emotional thing as well, not just to protect your muscles and bones. It also protects your emotions.
What are you most looking forward to in the whole mission? Is it launch? Is it seeing Earth? Is it seeing the moon? What's going to be
I'll
the
go
center?
first because I know what his answer is. And it's a great way to wrap that question. In addition to what Victor loves most is looking forward to the most, I really am excited about seeing the whole Earth, the whole marble of Earth hanging in space. I mean, what an extraordinary opportunity. And it's just going to reemphasize for me the importance, things that we know are really important for the 8 billion of us here, is we have got to get our act together. When I look around, I am just, like a lot of us, just not satisfied with humanity right now. And that is just going to be really important to see that, but also to have others see it at the same time. As 4 humans are seeing it, have others pay attention and look back and see themselves and be reminded that we have got to work together on this planet or we will not survive here.
Yep. And, I think people may assume I'm being facetious when I say I'm looking forward to splashdown. But it's not because I'm in a rush for the mission to be over, but if that's not successful, then we don't enable the future things. All those objectives come to a halt until we figure out what went wrong. And so splashdown in a successful mission means, one, our families can relax and exhale, but it also means that we're at least in the process of handing off the stick of this relay race. Now Artemis 3 can take off and run their best race. And so it enables the future of this program. And then we get to start telling people about those things, the view, how it looked, how it feels, and why we need to work together and be here for one another. So, but splashdown, for me, it symbolizes a successful mission.
And where are you splashing down?
Off the coast of San Diego, so 50-ish or so miles is the plan. But for weather, we have options to move it further away from the coastline, but off the coast of San Diego.
Interesting. Because I was thinking which ones came down in the desert recently, but it was the
Starliner?
no, it was the
The asteroid return.
The asteroid return, yeah. It was Bennu, wasn't it? It was the
Yes.
asteroid return. I was thinking you can't be coming down into the desert. That would be.
No, well, so the Boeing Starliner spacecraft, we haven't flown one with crew yet, but their test mission was successful and it lands on land. And our Soyuz, with most of our current crop of astronauts went to the space station via Soyuz, and that lands on land as well.
Yeah.
But no, we will land in the water, very similar to the Apollo capsule.
Yeah.
The parachutes will look very similar. Made by the same company, actually. So we will land in the Pacific Ocean just like they did and be picked up by the U.S. Navy just like they were.
I was looking at the viewing figures actually for the moon landing in Britain, because I thought that has to be the most viewed of all time, but it wasn't. It was Splashdown, and I was trying to work out why that was, and it was a timing thing. It was just in the middle of the night for the moon landing, whereas Splashdown happened in the middle of the day, so everyone could watch it. So fingers crossed everyone might be watching it this time round as well. I think we've only got a minute left, so I think all's left of me to say is thank you so much. It's been such a treat to have you here. The Telegraph readers are very lucky to have managed to meet you before you become so massive and household names that we probably won't be able to get hold of you anymore, I imagine.
Try going to Canada with this guy. It's already that way. But thank you, Sarah. This has been great.
Yeah, it's really important for us to share the inspiration of Artemis, and so we will definitely 100% have time for the Telegraph in the future.
Perfect. Well, we'd love to have you back afterwards.